actually have my thank you slide at the end, but I'll start with my thank yous because that's how people are doing it. So big thank you to my advisor, Eric Brown, as well as the entire IMBS staff for being very critical and helping me to make the best presentation and best paper and best project, as well as my mentors, Dr. Williams and Serena Gleaned, the campus dietitian. I also want to thank two other people who are not here. A woman named Jessica Weiss, who helped me to create my artifact thing, and as well as Matthew Burke, who is a very important member of the Baltimore Free Farm, my target population, who set me up with tons of connections so I was able to make this. Okay, so hi, I am Mel Scher. My capstone is From Gleaned to Cuisine on Increasing Food and Nutrition Knowledge. So, we all like good food, right? Well, did you know that 9.5 million Americans each day do not have access to nutritious foods? At the same time, 48% of food in America is thrown away. 10% of this is from grocery stores, just into the trash. So the purpose of my capstone is how food policy, nutrition, and education can be integrated effectively into a cookbook that will positively impact food security of low-income communities such as the Baltimore Free Farm. And I'll talk about the Baltimore Free Farm in a few slides. So what is food security? Food security is having adequate access to food for all people at all times. For a healthy life, where food is defined as necessary to maintain life and growth. So it also includes the nutrients in the food, so let's just say an apple compared to a bag of chips. They may have the same amount of calories, but there's certainly more nutrients in an apple, such as vitamins and minerals and fiber, as opposed to a bag of chips, which is less nutrient dense. So the disciplines and key concepts. So the natural sciences, so I have a background in nutrition, like the biology and how the food in your body helps to do certain processes. There's health and public policy, that I learned about the disparities facing many Americans of the people who lack food security and what can cause the people to have limited nutrition as well as a low health status because of that, and that barriers exist for people to obtain food insecurity, such as living in a food desert. And a food desert is defined as an area where residents lack both access to sufficient economic resources to purchase healthy food and are below the federal poverty line and also lack transportation. For education and communication, I have theories from health communication on the behavior change theory model, which is to understand the most beneficial way to effectively address a population, and that specific audiences require different ways of communicating to create a behavior change. There's other communication courses such as best ways to communicate with different mediums and how people receive information. And I also used education using Bloom's taxonomy, which is an educational tool that orders the mental capabilities in order to effectively communicate a learning objective. So my cookbook has integrated the use of Bloom's taxonomy as a way of ordered learning. And also interdisciplinary studies courses to create concept maps, how to integrate disciplines, as well as a food systems seminar class, IMBS 430, which introduced me to the world of the food systems and sparked my interest. So I used interpretivism for my methodology, and it's capturing meaning through experiences and observations. And so this is an explanation as to why people face food insecurity and how to appropriately address the gap between food security, nutrition, and education. That people's individuals' attitudes towards health and nutrition are influenced by their physical and social environment, race, age, and socioeconomic status, and that different barriers inhibit a person from having these resources and having food security, and it can be influenced by their social and physical environment. So as I said, I talked about the Baltimore Free Farm. So the Baltimore Free Farm, as it says up there, is an egalitarian collective of gardeners and activists who aim to provide access to healthy food for all, and was created with the belief that the hierarchical systems are organizing and damaging to our lives, our minds, and our relationships. So they are a really awesome place, and the demographic are mostly young adults or families who want fresh produce to cook with, yet do not necessarily have the access or can afford it. So how do they do that? They have Food Rescue Day on Wednesdays. Every Wednesday they go and get food that grocery stores are so willing to give to them that they would originally been throwing out. And then they sort through this, and people from the community can come and pick up these fruits and vegetables to take home. They also have an urban hillside garden for community members, can rent a plot and can plant produce, whichever produce they want. They also have a concert venue, and they have events on gardening, food justice, and activism. So it's a very cool place. And it's located in Baltimore in Hamden. So the interdisciplinarity of my capstone. I build complex multi-causal explanations, and I bridge the explanation-action gap. So here's a concept map that I have. And so for building complex and multi-causal explanations, I use the explanation for why people do not have food security, and the disciplines I used are nutrition and food policy. And so my cookbook tool that I created is the action in order to increase a person's food security in order to bridge the explanation-action gap. So the disciplines in my cookbook that I've integrated is nutrition, as obviously, food communication strategies to be able to be effectively understood by a population who doesn't necessarily know much about science, and it needs to be in a very basic term so people can understand it, as well as Bloom's taxonomy of the learning domain so people can integrate information that I have taught them and be able to apply it to other aspects of their life. So creating my capstone, I needed to examine past research projects that have been done. So the first one is the family involvement, which is where it was for pre-elementary and pre-K and elementary schools, where they gave nutrition booklets to take home, and they were promoting the 5-a-day fruit and vegetable intake. And so overall that the family, so there was a control group and an experimental group, and the control group that did not receive the booklet had less fruit and vegetable consumption as opposed to the ones who actively used the take-home element at home, and they had increased their fruit and vegetable consumption. The edible schoolyard in NOLA, as in New Orleans, the community after the hurricane, was a place for children to learn how to garden, to cook, and to build community, and that showed that learning about getting access to different foods that they would have not necessarily have known about, like fresh produce, and it's when you grow your own food, you're more willing to try it and cook with it. And in Baltimore, we have these two programs, the Be More Fresh and Be More Healthy Retail Rewards Design, which was Baltimore's direct way to address the food deserts in Baltimore, which was trying to get these corner stores and convenience stores to be able to lower their healthy food prices, because healthier foods tend to be more expensive than the less healthy foods. And so they tried to make the prices lower to see if people would purchase them more. And Be More Fresh is a way to get more supermarkets and grocery stores, as well as farmers markets and transportation to these farmers markets in these lower income communities. So I also had an internship at the Expanded Food and Nutrition Education Program, where I facilitated nutritional education lessons to low-income parents. And this was a great opportunity. It was based on the American Dietary Guidelines, which they taught with, and it was 6 to 8 nutritional lessons, and it included like food demonstrations, food tasting, and just learning about the 5 basic food groups. And one limitation that I saw of this study was that it was a time commitment. Each week it was an hour and a half that these parents had to go to, and I think that really deterred a lot of parents from coming, because a lot of parents did drop out towards the end. So it wasn't the information that was being taught, it was simply that there was a time commitment, and that went into me thinking like there's an all-in-one resource for these people and families to use. So actually creating this zine, which is what I'll explain in a second, which is a homemade magazine, which is what my cookbook is. I actually had to go to Food Rescue Day, and I volunteered there, and that was really awesome. Meeting with Jessica Weiss, who I mentioned, who helped me to create the recipes, as well as pantry and kitchen basics, and meeting with someone who uses the Baltimore Free Farm, and who has made one of these type of magazines before. Her name was Leela. And so a zine, on a more broader term, is a homemade magazine. It's supposed to look genuine and handmade. So many people at the Baltimore Free Farm use these zines. They have a whole shelf of zines. And it's a way, it can come in all different formats. It's a way for people to express themselves, talk about issues, or just to talk about a story they want to do, like a comic book. And so for creating it, I collected recipes based on the ingredients that people typically can get from the Baltimore Free Farm. It includes just a couple of other ingredients you can pick up at the grocery store that are typically like canned beans or like, you know, some sauce. And I wrote out the recipes and included nutritional elements about the ingredients in the recipes for the benefits of the vitamins and minerals in their body. And I also tested the recipes. So the nutritional lessons will build off each other. The nutritional content includes vitamins and minerals, as well as a different type of macronutrients, such as proteins, carbohydrates, and fats, and why they're essential in a person's diet every day. The reader should be able to analyze and apply the information in other aspects of nutrition. And using the zine, you would integrate Bloom's taxonomy by me choosing effective and understandable language to get the objective of the zine across so that people can understand the language. And I also included information about the most prevalent diet-related illnesses, such as cardiovascular disease and diabetes, and how a healthier diet lowers a person's risk in getting one of these. So here I just have some pictures from inside of my zine. And so this is some pantry basics about measuring tools, and then I have pantry basics, and then this is just an introduction, a very broad breakdown of macronutrients, vitamins, and minerals, just so people have a basis for when they're using it. And so here's an example of one of my pages. It's a recipe for this beautiful stew down here. It lists the ingredients, it lists step-by-step instructions, and it lists the nutritional elements. You can see that the protein, it's talking about lentils and how it's a really cheap protein. So how my research relates to the field, as I talked about, the Baltimore Free Farm, they are trying to reduce food waste in Baltimore and making it available to people in the community for free, so people can cook with it and make meals that are way more, a lot more nutritious for them as opposed to always eating out. The Expanded Food and Nutrition Education Program, where I interned, where they're providing free lessons to low-income parents about nutrition basics and how to cook and how to shop on a limited budget, as well as Be More Fresh, which I talked about. Thank you. And that's currently what's going on in Baltimore to address the problem of food deserts, as I mentioned, about getting transportation or getting more grocery stores, getting more farmers markets, Baltimore area. So limitations of my project is a very mixed demographic who use the Baltimore Free Farm. I originally went in thinking that it would be mostly families, but it's a lot of young adults who also use it. My project is not created to examine the effectiveness of the Baltimore Free Farm users, but it does have the potential, if it's very popular at the Baltimore Free Farm, creating more copies, and even the potential to teach Gleaned food cooking classes at the Baltimore Free Farm. So here are additional works cited about my research, and then my thank yous left. So, thank you. And you guys can look at these.
Questions from the floor? I've been looking forward to seeing this for a long time. You got a question already?
What's one of your favorite recipes?
In the book? Just in general. I really like pesto, which is one of the recipes in there because it's really versatile. But there's a lot in there. The stew that I showed a picture of was a really good, and it was like, it's a very cheap stew to make. It was lentils, potatoes, and like kale. So.
A quick follow-up.
Yeah, go ahead.
Have you thought about like doing sort of alternative dishes? I mean, I just got this.
What do you mean by alternative dishes?
So let's say like there's a lot of really foods with like high saturated fats, like Chick-fil-A meals or something like that.
Oh, like making it a healthier version?
Yeah.
That wasn't the purpose of my project, but I mean, it always has potential, but you know, when you fry something or you like bake fried, it's never gonna taste the same because fried food is just fried food and it's delicious. Yes.
So help me out, and I want you to push back on this. I'm a myopic scientist, and I'm like, okay, you told me clearly that your point was not to measure what an impact this had, and your point was not necessarily to offer, say, alternative, lower calorie options. How do we experience, how do we know success in this project when we see it?
So my goal is to put this, I will be putting this at the Baltimore Free Farm, and after I graduate, which is in a couple of weeks, I will definitely be going to the Baltimore Free Farm more, and simply talking with the people there on Food Rescue Day, say, or there's a Food Not Bombs Day where they cook also with this Gleaned food, and just talking to people, seeing how they're interested in it, seeing if they want to use it, seeing if they want more copies of it, and that is definitely has the possibility, and there's also a bookstore called Red Emma's, which they actually sell these zines, and so it has the potential to do that. You don't make much of a profit, but it's the purpose of getting it out, and you know, people, it would be exciting if so many people want to use it.
Okay.